Yes. Yes, just 10 fish. It was good. It was a beautiful day, of course. Best day we've had.
Which hour did you fish?
We fished from 9:30 through till 6 o'clock.
Really?
Yes.
10 fish.
We had a break for about an hour and a half at lunchtime.
No, I'm being facetious. It's not my best habit.
But the fish caught all during the day. Some were caught first thing and some were caught at the very end. So there was no specific time when everybody was into fish. They were spread out throughout the day.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, that's good.
All the clients hooked a fish, but not all of them actually landed one. But there were 1 or 2 long distance releases this afternoon.
That's good. That's good. Keep people on their toes. Well, I think we're there. We're at the magic hour, aren't we?
Oh, we are. We're 1 minute past. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Charles, and thank you for everyone who's come on the line this evening. Lovely to see you. Oh, gosh, I can see there's masses and masses and masses of you. And so just to remind you of the topic tonight, it's I think this is our 6th or 7th in the Hero versus Villains series. And tonight we're going to say the rainbow or brown trout, which is the better sporting fish. And so the question really is for all you to consider and for us to discuss is, which would you rather catch, a brown or a rainbow? Plenty here in the UK consider the rainbow to be an inferior game fish, with apologies to our colonial cousins in North America, an unwanted.
Oh, Simon, you're dancing into dangerous land.
No,
you really are.
Apologies.
There's a thing called Boston, and there's a thing called Tea Party. Put them together.
No. I as I say, as they would say in the House of Commons, with respect to my learned friend, an unwanted import that doesn't count towards the daily telling. And if you think I'm just saying this to be controversial, I can absolutely promise you, for those of you who know fishing breaks, you'll know that everyone who fishes with us will get a request for feedback after every fishing trip. And I do genuinely get emails from people saying, had a lovely day, but disappointed that I caught some rainbows. So it is.
Why? What?
Well, maybe we can move on to that a bit later on. Why there is this sort of dichotomy, especially here in the UK.
Well, it's prejudice. It isn't dichotomy. It's prejudice.
Charles, go on. We'll just carry on from this point. Explain why you think it's prejudice.
Well, they're both estimable sporting creatures that we pursue. The chances are that the brown trout that person caught was a triploid anyway, so it wasn't born in that river, and we're back to that old thorny issue. Whereas a rainbow would be no different. It's just a different species. Growing up as I did well, no, hang on, I've never grown up, but growing up fishing the little Stour in Kent, my father got some fish from Byberry Fish Farm. They were rainbows. We had brown trout there too, but we had rainbows. And he wanted to do an experiment. We were one of, I think, 6 or 7 rivers in the whole of the UK that ended up having breeding rainbow trout. And I promise you, Simon, I promise you that those fish were far nicer to catch in terms of the guile that you needed, and the fight that ensued. Yes, it was lovely to catch the brown trout, but a rainbow, now goodness me, when it's naturalized or when it's been born in that river, as anyone that fishes the Wye would tell you, and we're talking about the Derbyshire Wye, of course, or indeed the Chess. And they are incredible fish. And I don't know anyone, I don't know anyone who hasn't fished Henry's Fork or any of the rivers out west in America who don't absolutely venerate a rainbow. They are wily, they are tenacious, they're altogether a wonderful creature to pursue. I love catching brown trout too.
but here's the thing, and then I think this, it will. I'm trying to go some way to explaining why people write these comments that they did. I think there's two things. First of all, they are not native fish.
No, I accept that.
Though interestingly, for environment anoraks amongst us here, the Environment Agency do actually now classify rainbow as native fish.
Really? How do they get that one?
I cannot tell you that, but they are on their list of native fish. They're not classified as non-native. I mean, maybe that's got something to do with, I think we've been stocking them in our rivers, I think since, is it 1853? Something like
something
that?
like that. Yeah, it's 1847, 1853, something like that.
And I think part of the problem is that they are so I mean, first of all, there's very little chance of a rainbow trout actually being wild.
I agree with that. Yeah,
I accept your point that Derbyshire Wye and the Chess and a few other places, they have become totally naturalized and there is a self-sustaining wild population. So there's no chance of kidding yourself that you've caught a wild fish if you catch a rainbow. And secondly, I think people like the purity. They like the concept that the River Test is a brown trout river, and they just see the rainbow trout as slight interlopers. And they do see them as easier to catch. And there's the other slightly more cynical aspect of it. I mean, those of you who have any hand in river management, you'll know that rainbow trout cost roughly half the price of brown trout. So you can get more bang for your buck if you stock rainbow trout.
I think the important thing to get into some kind of perspective is if we go to New Zealand, and my goodness me, wouldn't I love to do that at the moment? But
well, you could go, but you couldn't come back.
Well, oh dear, what a shame that would be. But if you go to New Zealand, there you've got the same issue. You've got both species. Both species were put in the rivers. They've become naturalized. They've become both revered. But a rainbow trout in New Zealand, it's another animal. It really is. Now I love and please don't think I'm biased towards not catching brown trout. I love catching brown trout. Who doesn't? I mean, I had a lyric day on the upper section of Bossington last week, and they've really done a great job up there. They really have, and they're almost rewilding the whole thing. And I caught nothing else but little wild brown trout. I was thrilled. I was absolutely thrilled with that, and it's lovely to see them getting back and really making a fin hold in the river, But you go out to these places, Simon, in Colorado, in New Zealand, all the rest of it, you encounter a rainbow, and I would say on balance, and I'd love to hear what some of the people would say in America that have joined the court. It can be far more, I always hate using the word selective, but they can be very, very much harder to inveigle.
Well, you think rainbow? So just so I understand you correctly, because I'm probably going to contradict you here. That's what I think I've heard you say. Do you think then that rainbow trout are harder to catch than brown trout?
I think if they've been caught and released a few times, yes, I do.
Interesting. I mean, definitely. I mean, I've done most of my fishing in the States in Wyoming and Idaho, and you don't catch very many browns, and the guides seem to find catching browns a rarity compared to rainbows, particularly in Montana, in Wyoming and Idaho cutthroat. So I find that interesting. I did discover some years ago an interesting fact about the way browns and rainbows inhabit the deeper, slower stretches of the chalk streams. I had a beat behind the Greyhound in Stockbridge. I'm sure many of you know it, maybe have fished it or had dinner there and seen it. And it's a proper carrier. It was there for irrigating the water meadows. it has a big impoundment at the end for the hatches that then protect the city of, well, the town of Stockbridge from flooding. And so because of that, it's very deep and it's very slow. And the first couple of years I had it, we poured brown trout into it. And the catch returns were very poor, and especially as a proportion of the number of fish that went into it. And someone said to me, Simon, why don't you just try some rainbows? And I mean, I didn't want to do it, but I did, because we just seemed to be banging our head against a brick wall, and it transformed it. The rainbows, whereas the browns seem to inhabit the lower 50% of the river, the rainbows seem to occupy the top 50%, and for that reason were much easier to catch. And I found that an interesting sort of psychology of the two different species.
Well, if we move further down the river, if we're staying on the test just for a minute, back in, 76, 82, 84, and we're not talking about 1884, you cheeky lot. I can recall times during the heat of summer where we were down there with Dermot, and we used to get an influx of rainbows coming in from above, from the fish farms above. There was nothing we could do about it. They were great, actually. I mean, they were full finned and wonderful, but we couldn't control that. But they used to inhabit and used to feed at times and in areas that the browns just never populated. So it gave us fishing. We were on, even back then, we were on leaders of 18, 20 feet at certain times of the year in order to catch those fish, and very small flies. When I say small flies, for this country, I'm talking 22s and 24s, because they would not look at anything else. And I still recall those days, and people would book to come fish those fish.
It's a very interesting point, and actually browns are quite fussy about about the type of river they inhabit, especially once they get really over a pound and a bit. I noticed that you have large sections of a chalk stream. It looks perfect, but larger brown trout simply do not inhabit it. It's either too shallow, too fast, too exposed. And they
I'm going to get shot down for saying this. I really am. But if you get a brown trout that is feeding really, really hard, and it's not been overly fished, it's not been returned a few times and the rest of it, it can be the most naive species on the planet. A rainbow is a little bit more circumspect, I would say. And that's why I'm siding with the rainbow, not for a personal perspective, but from a purely sporting perspective. Yes, I would love to catch brown trout. The spots, the colour, everything about them is beautifully honed for what they are and where they live. And I don't know anyone in the UK, or indeed anywhere in the world, who doesn't love catching brown trout. But the thing was, is it a better sporting fish? And I would say on balance, the rainbow was. There you are. Nailed the colours to the mast.
Well, I'd probably divide my answer into two for that one. I would say, I don't think anyone is going to be mad enough to pretend that brown trout, once they get to a pound and a half, are the greatest fighting fish in the world. That, they'll give you a little bit of a run around. They'll try and head for the weed if they can, but for the most part, it's not a great spawning fish. Brown trout typically don't aerialize.
I would disagree with you there. If you go
no.
Yeah, I would. Absolutely, I would. Because if I took you to an Irish loch, or a Clyn, or a Scottish loch, and you get some of those smaller fish up there, they are like it's like getting hold of a border terrier. I mean, they will not let go, and they do not take prisoners. I mean, they really are. They're amazing. And a Leven fish from Loch Leven is something divine. It really is.
Indeed, they're a lovely fish, but I think we have to agree that the rainbow trout is is a far harder fighting fish.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I mean the vivacity of them. You catch a full-finned, overwintered fish, South Arm, Rutland, about this time of year. Oh my goodness me! Make sure you've got backing, ladies and gentlemen.
But I will slightly disagree with you, because I do think browns are more selective, and I think it's harder to induce. You can get rainbow trout to come with a very fast strip fly across a river.
I'm dying for somebody from America to come in now. I really am. Someone that knows Henry's Fork, knows the ghosts that just move up and down that corridor, that huge motorway of insect and weed, and you just you'd eat your word.
Shall we take this moment to have a look through
Yes, please.
the chat? So gosh, we've got people here. So hi, David Wallace from South Africa.
Well, there's another one. They've got fantastic rainbow trout fishing there. Amazing.
Well, David says he thinks they only have rainbow trout in South
Well, I
Africa.
think they probably do, but they got fantastic rainbow trout.
Oh my God. I'm going to tell everyone, because you'd never guess it, because Charles had an operation on his jaw earlier in the week.
Yeah.
I was rather hoping it would shut him up. And
No,
I
it
would
won't.
have the
No,
floor to
no
myself for the forks. But clearly that was a weak thought.
A whim. It was.
So, well, thank you, David. So the answer is probably yes to only rainbows. And we've got Aubrey Winnie, who's coming from us from Chile. Now there's absolutely a country on my wish list. I am dying to go to Chile. I think in Chile they have just about everything, don't they, Charles?
I don't know. I've never fished there, so we can go together.
We will. We should. So they have huge sea trout for sure. I think they have big brown trout too. Perhaps Aubrey
can tell us.
Tell us, Aubrey, are you there?
Yes, I am indeed. I'm delighted to join you here, and I've got my Union Jack braces on.
Very good.
Now, towards the south of Chile, and unfortunately, Chile is one of these countries where people have been taking as many fish out as they can. So you have to go so far now down to the south to catch fish. But we have some superb browns in the south, superb rainbows as well, without doubt. Both originally introduced. They weren't native to the country years and years ago, and but unfortunately, in some rivers, we've got now a whole load of cohos and like starting to run up the rivers, and they're destroying what used to be good brown and rainbow fishing. Extreme south of Chile, down right to the end, Tierra del Fuego. If you want to go down there, you can catch some fish, and good ones.
Aubrey, just a question to you, I think. Those cohos and probably pinks and kings and silvers, are they escapees from fish farms, or how does that happen?
Yes, sir. That's how they started. There's a lot of fish farming down here. In fact, the fish farming was started originally by during the military regime. General Pinochet thought it would be a good idea to farm salmon, and we're one of the biggest exporters, close to New Zealand, for salmon farming.
Really, that's incredible. But you've got that wonderful lake, though, haven't you? Up with you, the one where they catch those really huge rainbows at a Jurassic Lake. That is somewhere I've always wanted to fish. It's somewhere with Pete Cockrell.
I think that one is, if I'm not mistaken, is in Argentina.
Is it?
On the other side of the so.
Right. but that is just immense. And there, I mean, the rainbows are legendary, absolutely legendary.
But if I'm right in saying, I think the rainbows in the Jurassic Lake were only stopped about 10 years ago by the tourist board, just to bring some trade to an otherwise desolate part of the country.
But they've done so well, Simon. They've just naturalised, and these things are incredible. I mean, is there a mammoth gammarus population or something? Something like that. I mean, I don't know. I haven't fished all of them, but I mean, I've just seen the pictures, and they're just solid. They look like steelhead, for goodness sake. They really do. You know, and there's another one. You know, you're going to talk rainbows, better talk steelhead too.
We'll come on to. But Aubrey, I just wanted to ask you a couple of quick questions. So, are the cohos actually running up the river and spawning?
I think they must be. Yes.
Wow.
That's what they're going up there for, I presume.
and so, but brown trout are the native fish of Chile. And
no, not native. They're not native. They were introduced into the country by the British, of course, for many years ago.
Interesting.
Way back in the 1800s. I thought it was a good idea to put some fish into entertain. Incidentally, if you want a bit of information, local information, experiences in Chile, Peter Cockwell's been out there quite a few times. Do you know Peter Cockwell?
Yeah, I know Pete. We've been fishing together for 50 years.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I used to live in Godalming,
All right,
where he was, and but Peter's been out here a few times, I believe.
Yeah,
he has. Yes.
Loves it. Yeah,
he's almost a neighbour of ours now. He lives just up on the Diva at Newton Stacey. Well, thanks, Aubrey. That was really fascinating, and thanks for joining us. Well, just as a matter of interest, what time is it there in Chile?
A perfect time. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock at lunchtime.
I was going to say you deserve a medal if you were getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
No.
Excellent.
So,
thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bye.
So we'll move on to the comments. Comment from an American friend who fishes locally on the Ver and the local still waters in the home country. Question for me is more about the environment the fish are in. Wild rainbow is a great catch, but harder to find around here than wild brownies, so more special.
Oh, right. There we are.
So I'm guessing that's someone up in on the Derbyshire Wye. Here in Steve Fernandez.
Stephen.
Okay, we'll get Stephen on the line when I've read his comment. Here in the colonies, most of our revered rivers have had their original salmonids largely replaced by both rainbows and brown trout, so neither is truly native in many waters. So, Steve, if you're online and you'd like to unmute yourself, my question to you, is that a good or a bad thing?
It is hard to say because, you know, if you fish the Henry's Fork, like Harriman's Ranch, which is a tremendous rainbow trout fishery, the recipient of the loss is the Snake River cutthroat. So that fish has been largely supplanted in that area of water. But you know, I wouldn't kick a rainbow out of the bed, especially not those ones, when there might be 6 hatches on the water and 6 different stages of development, and you have to choose, find out which one is the correct one, find out what the feeding rhythm of that rainbow is, hope that your fly is over there with no drag, a 7X tippet, and when he finally takes after the 18th cast, the fish runs upstream, then downstream, and you watch the arbor of your reel just slowly disappear until it breaks. That's considered success.
Yes.
So I would say that.
Or Steve, it plows through about 3 weed beds and comes out the other side laughing.
Exactly. In the air.
Yeah.
I find this interesting because I also fish for very large golden trout in the backcountry, and golden trout are considered to be one of the idiot fish. And if you fish for larger fish, I've been on lakes where I have pulled my hair out and never figured out what those 18-inch, 20-inch goldens are taking. or get the same situation where you finally hook one and it takes off and that's the end of it. I think any large fish, whether brook trout, cutthroat, or anything like that, that has survived for as long as it has, is an incredibly worthy adversary and is as flighty as any of the other ones.
I think you're right, but there is something. I mean, and I know that what you're saying about the cutthroat and rainbows at on the park area of Henry's Fork is probably accurate, but I mean, what a species. I mean, it's like chasing ghosts, isn't it? It really is. I mean, anyone, I defy any true fly fisher not to derive the utmost pleasure and heartbreak and reverence for the fish after fishing that place. I really do.
Yeah, I was just on Hot Creek Ranch last year with Wayne and Donna, and we had this was August, we had a very late PMD hatch, and there was one rainbow.
For the non-natives here, a PMD is a pale morning dun, okay? Right.
But these were size 16s, and there was one about a 20-inch rainbow in front of me looking at me, feeding ravenously. And I have no idea how many hook casts, slackline casts, no matter what I did. And he was feeding right beside my fly every time. I finally hooked him. And he did the typical thing, went down into the weeds, and that was the end of it.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely.
But I think we're all at that lucky point. Just hooking the fish is the victory, frankly. The rest is just, So I think rainbows are made for really cold water, unbeatable, real power, going from feeding in slow motion to supersonic speed when hooked in the blink of an eye. I mean, I think that's incredibly true of rainbow trout. Brown trout don't react quite as much when first hooked. There's usually that strike, and the brown trout sort of like sends a telegram to its brain, and then it starts to fight.
Well, it's rather similar, Simon. I mean, I do quite, as you know, I do quite a lot of stillwater fishing, and I love fishing dry fly for rainbows because you almost you place your fly in front of them and they take it, and you hook them and they don't do anything. They go, oh, that was a mistake, and then suddenly wake up to what the mistake was, and that's it. They're off. I mean, I love that. I just love that.
Yeah. No. So from Howard, hi everyone. Howard Rosen here. Come to my favorite creeks and rivers in the southwest of Alaska. Wow, we really are covering the world tonight. Alaska to Chile. You'll quickly learn how rainbows 30 inches or more and up to 15 pounds make your day. Frankly, would make my life. Never seen a brown there. Also, my wife Carol and I had the pleasure of fishing for the test for browns in August 2017. It was a delightful, young, but experienced guy, name of Alex Jardine. Charles, please give Alex our press.
I will have, and he's now a dad, and getting married.
Oh, is he?
Yes, about the time too.
That's the way everyone does it these days. So, when's the wedding?
I daren't say because I'll probably get told off for even mentioning it, but they haven't really settled on a date yet. So it's, but it's about time, anyways.
Here's a good question from Marshall. Has anyone tried?
There's never been a good question from Marshall. If it's Marshall Bissett, there's never been a good question. All right,
Charles, this is all meant to be in the spirit of friendliness.
Is it really good?
I know you want to style yourself as the Piers Morgan of fly fishing.
I think it's fast happening, actually.
Sorry, Marshall, you asked the question, so it's a good excuse to shut Charles up.
My question was, a lot of us try to fish.
Are you wearing a hat indoors, for goodness sake, man? You're from Scotland. What's the matter with you?
Michael Paradas and I and Stephen Fernandez have done that simply to upset you because
it's working, isn't it?
We know how well you rise to dry we we in the United States who do not have enough frustration and irritation in our lives already go fishing for steelhead, which which is all about reward, all about perfecting your casting for months and months, spending fortunes going to British Columbia, Oregon, Washington. So my question is, has anyone tried to put steelhead into the British waterways? And have they tried and failed, or just not bothered? Because that might be fun.
They kind of have, Marshall, but it's not been. I don't think it's been an unprecedented success. Somebody said that we had steelhead coming up the rivers in the southeast, and I don't necessarily agree with that. They just don't seem. It just doesn't seem to work. I don't know. I mean, excuse me. I think we need a fishery biologist for that one, but it doesn't seem to happen.
I would think. I mean, we obviously stock a large number of rainbows here, but I don't know if you're aware, Marshall, but here since I would say about 2015, we've only been allowed to stock triploid rainbow trout, as you know, it's essentially desexed. And so, I mean, there's always the possibility that if you put a pure fully sexed rainbow into a chalk stream, it's going to go in and out of the estuaries, and it's going to become essentially a steelhead. But I think it's unlikely to happen very much, as we can only have these desexed fish. I mean, because I suspect that just removes the motivation for going to the ocean and then coming back again.
I mean, okay, my next question is that how is the sea trout population fairly depleted in the UK now?
Yes, it is, Marshall. There's a real concern about it, and I mean, whether that's because conditions last year were pretty appalling when people normally fish for them or not, I don't know. But I think most people see sea trout almost in tandem or contiguous to Atlantic salmon, and that sort of parallel. Neither anadromous fish, in that respect, it can be separated, I think. So it's not great. Really.
I'm just going to ask Alan, who's sitting next to me, because Alan is from Sussex, and bizarrely, Sussex.
No, he's not. He's from the northeast.
I live there at the moment.
Okay, sorry, I stand corrected. Alan, for if you don't know, is actually a Geordie, and he's a typical Geordie insofar as A, he still supports Newcastle, and B, he still has the accent, despite the fact he's lived down here for about 40 or 50 years. But Sussex, where he resides, where they tolerate him, that has some really good sea trout rivers. So what's the report on that?
The River Ouse has the largest size of sea trout in the country. They average over 10 pounds in weight. They're not large numbers, and the numbers have never gone up and they've never really gone down. They're certainly less than 100 fish caught in a year, but those that are caught are very big. They don't populate the whole of the Ouse catchment, but there are 2 or 3 tributaries which take all of the fish, and some of the locals can catch 2 or 3 fish in an evening, and they generally a double-figure fish.
Wow.
Do they run the adder as well?
Yeah, they run the adder as well, and I live on the adder, and we get a run of sea trout, and we will get between 50 and 60 a year, but nobody tells anybody about it.
Well, you have now.
Yeah, but you don't know where they're going to be caught.
People all know, but it's like the Bewley. No one talks about really the Bewley, but because it's such a short area, and you get a good sea trout run in there, but it's such a small thing, and then they go up into the New Forest and get lost. But I think, to answer Marshall's question, that actual numbers are perilously low compared with what they used to be. I remember sort of rose-tinted sunsets and catching finnick on the Isle of Mull like you wouldn't believe. I mean, you go out there and you catch any amount, but they're just not there now. They're just not fording the rivers. You know, there were times I've fished in North Wales where you could see them sort of making zephyrs across the shallows as they ran upstream from the coast. You can't see that anymore. So it is a situation that, you know, it's getting worse by year.
It's
Is that
interesting.
partly
Charles.
because of aquaculture, salmon farming? Does that affect?
It's just everything, Marshall. I think you know, we're all of us are hell bent on our own destruction. I think we've all come to that conclusion one way or another, and it's just a death by 1,000 cuts, really. I mean, yes, agriculture, yes. I mean, what's going on in our rivers in this country is nothing short of scandalous with the sewage thing. And I think everyone on this call that lives in this country knows that, you know, not enough is being done by any agency to control the amount of sewage coming into the waterways. And if you've got that, and you've got the profligacy going on around our rivers and our waterways, we haven't got a hope in hell, really. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to have to agree with Charles on that. For those of you who haven't watched it, I'd highly commend a Panorama program that came out about 5 weeks ago, BBC One. Just type in Panorama into iPlayer or YouTube, just Panorama, BBC Panorama sewage. And they did a fascinating, I mean, truly a fascinating investigation into the water companies and sewage. And they are basically just, they have the authority to pump 400. There have been 400,000 pumpings in the past year of sewage under various permitting, but a huge number of those are unpermitted. And the Environment Agency I won't even tell you, but they make you guess. They have actually prosecuted. There have been 4 prosecutions for unauthorized sewage pollution. And this program on BBC shows that water companies are breaking the law dozens of times a day. And it's easy to point the finger at water companies and say, well, it's all about profit motive. They're just doing it to make money. But all the same things are happening in Wales and most of the Welsh water authorities. For those of you who aren't intimately familiar with everything in this country.
Simon, just to come in, something crops up on the top of the screen. Someone mentioned about Loch Marie. And anyone that knows anything about sea trout will know that Loch Marie, Loch Stack, and all those ones right in the north of Scotland were the mecca of sea trout fishing on lochs. They used to have the Loch Marie Hotel. I don't know how many gillies were employed every summer to look after visiting anglers, but it ran into the teens, if not more. I think
Charles, sorry to interrupt, it was me that put it on there.
Right.
I know that area very well. We go there.
And who
annually.
who are we talking to?
Neil Weisfeld.
Neil, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. The Loch Marie Hotel, it's a bit of a historic story, whether it's true or not, but I know the people that run it now, and they think it is. The room bookings in the sea trout season were handed down from father to son. So if you had a room booking at the Loch Marie Hotel, you gave that booking, a week's booking time, to your son to keep it in the family, because it was impossible to get a room there. And now there is zero. I mean, you get the odd one, but there's zero sea trout there.
And that's purely because of salmon farming, purely.
Well, it's interesting because last time we were up there, I had what turned out to be quite a long discussion. We went to the market day at Ullapool just for a day out, and the environmental agency had a stand there, and I got talking about the whole thing with one of their professionals there, and she said, quite very interestingly, that the Loch Marie, the feeder it runs into Loch Ewe. And
Right.
Loch Ewe has got a number of salmon farms down the north bank. There's one after the other. And so the obvious reaction is to say, well, it's the salmon farming. But they, after quite a lot of research in that area, think salmon farming isn't the only issue. The other issue, which she was very hot about, which was quite startling, is tree plantations. She said one of the biggest problems they're finding is that the acidity in the, like the Little Grignard River that runs into Grignard Bay, the Ewe River, which is only about a mile and a half long, that runs from Loch Marie into Loch Ewe, which is the feeder river. The acidity levels have gone up dramatically, and they think it's because of the conifer planting all over the slopes of the Northwest Highlands.
Well, okay, I can accept that a bit, but I think that's slightly a convenient excuse not to do anything about the salmon farms, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just recounting what she's saying. You might.
I'll just jump in actually and say I was doing some research on forestry earlier in the year, and there is no doubt that forestry has had a hugely negative impact on rivers. It does completely change the whole water catchment, and so yes, of course we don't want to let some fish farms off the hook, but you could get rid of the fish farms and you'd still have the issue with forestry, which is a major problem. And
it would be interesting to timeline that though, Simon, and see the decline of the sea trout in ratio with the amount of population or tree planting that went on in those catchment areas, and see if it correlated. It'd be interesting.
I mean,
we're getting off the subject rather, aren't we?
Well, I'm just going to jump in and say one last thing. Is another thing everyone should watch if you haven't seen it on Netflix is Seaspiracy. And if you want to see a total annihilation of fish farming and what it does, I wouldn't say it's a brilliant documentary, but it's an unusual documentary. It's been made by a young British documentary maker, and it goes across the whole thing of all types of fishing and sea, and you'll find it fascinating. I promise you, if you watch that documentary, you will never ever eat fish from a fish counter ever again.
Should we wrap it all up?
I would actually, the small little fact. We mentioned the Bewley earlier, which is used to be a great sea trout river. It is the only river in Britain that's not owned by the Crown.
Really?
Yeah. Every river in Britain is owned by the Crown, with one exception of the Bewley.
So that's owned by Montague, is it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. There you go. So what should we touch on for the last 20 minutes? 10, 15,
well, let's
10,
see
15.
what people. We must have some more questions about the wonders of one species against the other. We must, surely.
Well, we haven't mentioned grayling.
Well, yeah, we can't really mention grayling, can we? It's a slightly different area. I mean, if you do that, then we got to talk about brook trout, and we got to talk about all sorts of things. And I think we're going to start straying into areas that perhaps we shouldn't. I would like to say this though. I'd love to know what people's thoughts are if they had their last day fishing. They knew it was going to be their last day fly fishing. Which species would they go for? And where?
And how?
Well, we're going to say fly fishing. But...
I mean, look, I'm going to be a fright. I'll tell you mine. I'll tell you mine, Charles. If you'll show me yours.
Yeah, I'm quite honestly, mine would be really very well. Actually, oh God, one day I could do 2 time zones, couldn't I? But no, I think I'm with Steve on Fernandez on this. I would really really would love to be on Henry's Fork with a dry fly, with those incredibly fussy rainbows, just literally, and Steve will know what I mean, and anyone that's fished the Henry's Fork will know what I mean, that you will stalk a fish, you will actually monitor it, you will get its rhythm, you will notice, and you'll get into position. And I swear to God, it will just ghost out of position and then just rise in a different place. And it's as though you're chasing smoke. It's mesmerizing. It's absolutely mesmerizing. So
yeah. Yeah, mine would undoubtedly be a brown trout that you see just, when brown trout, we all know that brown trout have that posture in a river that they're thinking about feeding, they're ready, they're right to be plucked. And it's that, and just you cast the fly and it starts to drift down towards the fish, and the fish just, you actually see their bodies tense up, and then you see them start to move for the fly, and then you see them take it. For me, that's all that will be my last cast of my life. That would be enough for me. And
I'll tell you where you could make that, and it's one of the, I know it's not on your group of rivers, but the Bourne rivulet is just the most extraordinary river for seeing that, because it's so clear, and you can watch every fin quiver, every gill flutter, and every sort of almost breath that they make. It's incredible for that, and then they reject the fly, of course.
Yes, I think the Bourne rivulet, that was pretty well, the word pellucid was invented for that.
Yeah.
And I'd also say, actually, I found an equivalent to that. Actually, something I'd never ever fished in my entire life until a couple of weeks ago is the upper stretch, the headwater of the Wiley, up in the Deverils, and that's.
Oh, I know it well, because it used to be on the Salisbury ticket years ago, or some of it did. And there's some big fish up there, very big fish,
and very clear and very
yeah.
I mean, it's an early season river. I mean, you're cooked by July, but in most years, because the water levels drop and the flow goes down.
Saw a little note come up. Someone said something about wild browns. They wanted to fish for wild browns. I don't know who that was. Who was that?
Who was that? That's in answer to Charles Wild Browns. That's from Michael Rescall, who I know is lives in my favourite part of the world, the Meon Valley.
I have to say, for tranquility, peace and quiet, and fishing for wild browns on the Meon in a river that's no wider than your living room with a 3-weight or a 2-weight rod, and you can catch quite a few of them, and you might get a 1 pounder if you're lucky. You might get a 2.5 pound chub. It just beats it. It's just so beautiful.
But you see, the thing is, Michael, that you're going to be spending eternity in peace and quiet. I want to go out with a bang.
No, I want to be as far away from every other miserable bugger on the earth. So I can just on my own, the Cornish pasty and a flask of coffee.
There you go.
I see, Aubrey, you've put your hand up. Did you want to ask another question or make a point?
No, I'd like to make 2 comments. One regarding browns and rainbows, one or the other. I was down in the south of Chile fishing on a lake, and this man, we were about to fish, came up, and we were about to fish, and we got talking. And he was a fishing guide. And I said to him, "What are you doing here then?" He said, I'm a guide on one of the rivers there, which is just browns. And he said, I'm a guide. And he said, I am fed up of fishing on that river with people on that river, pulling out 26-inch browns all day long. He said, I want to catch a rainbow.
Oh, well, you see, everyone's stacking up for me. This is good. I like this.
That was his comment. The other comment I'd like to make is regarding to, I've forgotten his name, who you're speaking just now, but I started my fly fishing way back in the 1960s on the River Meon, and Portsmouth Services fly
Oh, it's
fishing.
Michael. It was Michael.
Oh, well.
Well,
There we are. I was in the Royal Navy at the time, and I find.
Well, that's really cool. I caught my first ever fish on the Meon as well. My first ever brown trout. So yeah, it's still a very special river. And it's actually surprisingly unchanged. I mean, I don't know when it was last time you fished it, Aubrey, but I'm pretty sure if you went back today, you wouldn't see an awful lot of difference.
it is a beauty. It really is. I noticed we had the lovely Leanne pop a question up about the Green River at some
Charles,
point.
can I just interrupt one moment?
Yeah.
As we've got just 10 minutes to go, let's have a bit of fun. Let's have a poll. So would you all just like to type one word in through the chat room? Which would you prefer? Which wins the debate today?
You always
Brown
do
or
something.
rainbow?
You always do something like this.
Go on then, Charles, you carry on.
No, I was just saying about the because Leanne wanted to say something about the green and I'm looking at all these things. Brown. Leanne's saying rainbow. Thank goodness for that. Marshall, he doesn't know anything about browns anyway. Yes, from Steve. I mean, he's just, well. Oh look, this is not fair. Poor old rainbow. Look at this. Oh, both.
Both.
You can't. No, Leanne, you can't do that, darling. You can't. You can't say rainbow 1 minute and both the next. Yeah, brown. Sorry. Well, at least someone says sorry. I'm going to lose this, aren't I? Badly.
Well, go on. Keep chatting, Charles.
Well, no, I just want to know, because everyone was agreeing with me that the rainbow was the best sporting fish, and now everyone's changing this to, well, I want to catch a brown. Well, okay, you go ahead and catch a brown trout, and you know, you go, oh well, okay, well, right.
Well, it's early in the poll. We've still got a few more minutes.
No,
you know,
no, the die is cast. Everybody
it could be like the
hates
referendum result, or it could easily be like Eurovision. I mean, who thought?
No,
who thought Italy were going to win?
I've got slightly more points than our wonderful entry, but not many, it has to be said.
It takes a lot of the efficiency to get lazy, so it's maybe. All right, okay. So, all right. So you've got 1 minute more to put your vote in, and then I'll do a quick count up.
Can I have?
Sorry, Charles. I mean,
I was going to ask Alan to verify that, actually.
Do you think? I mean, the one thing you and I discussed actually before we came on there, we were saying actually how probably a rainbow trout has changed more people's fishing lives than any other.
I think
fish.
it has. Yeah, I've got no. Because if you look at the volume of people that go fishing on our still waters compared with that of rivers, I mean, obviously from the position of accessibility, really, but you know, tactics have been honed for rainbows that really almost alienate browns. I mean, you look at Blagden, which when I first fished Blagden, it was. I won't say 50-50 rainbows and brown trout, but they're not stocking them. But what you said earlier in the discussion, Simon, was about cost. You know, that's got to come into the occasion. If you get somewhere like Rutland, you know, browns really love that place. Same used to love, you know, when they were put into Grapham. But there's some big fish coming out of Pittsford, big brown trout. But you know, you catch a 5 pound rainbow from these places, and honestly, it is like catching steelhead. It really is. You're madly scribbling away. This is those interested in about the impact. Oh, there we are. How are we doing?
Right. Well, I have the results here.
and I don't want to know them. I'm going to go.
As I say, Charles, it wasn't quite as bad. You were lagging badly at the beginning, but the final votes were 58% for brown trout, 42% for rainbow trout.
Well, I have to say that's a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, and I think
you got a sympathy vote there. When you started whinging, people voted for you.
That's what I was aiming for, frankly.
He's never whinged in his life.
Yes, I have. Lots, actually. And a lot last week, actually. It hurt.
It's interesting. It's a shame. I probably should go through this and then analyze it by which nation to get.
That would be interesting. I mean, to be honest, this is going to give us a very good idea of where people like to go fish. I mean, and because there are places that are skewed towards rainbows, there are places skewed towards brown trout. If you went down to fish a little Devon River, you wouldn't dream of catching a rainbow trout. You'd only catch brown trout, so you can go and do that. And I must admit, I would be a bit put out if I caught a rainbow from the test or the itchin. Really, I know that you do, but I would be. I think.
Yes,
I'm not changing my colours. Don't think that.
I mean, it is very situational. I think that's possibly. I think that's probably the conclusion we've all come to. As Steve said, in the States, where you've got these different fish and they react in different ways.
I'd love to see the discussion on who would prefer to go trout fishing and who would prefer to go salmon fishing, because that would be an interesting one, and that would point to one ethos against another one, because I think we go out with whether we're fishing for rainbows or whether we're fishing for brown trout, brook trout, whatever, I think we go out with the express idea that we're going to catch something. And I mean, really, why would we be doing it if we didn't? But a salmon fisher has got a totally different mindset. They seem to go up. We've got a very nice fishing hut.
But it's funny. I was having an interesting conversation with, I won't say who it was, but he runs one of the big overseas fishing operations in the UK, sending people salmon fishing all over the world. And he said he's noticed over the years that his clients fall into three groups when it comes to salmon fishing. There's the group that goes to Scotland, who are there really more for the holiday than for the fishing. He said there's the group who go to Iceland, who are both there for the holiday and the fishing, but slightly more for the fishing. And he said, and the people who go to Russia, he said they're just fucking fishing balls.
Can we say that on air?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, I'm only quoting. So he said they are fishing obsessives, and he said that's all they talk about.
But could we add another thing to that? They're very wealthy fishing obsessives.
They are. And he said also they've I hope to goodness he's not tuned into this. He said
he probably is.
He said, and of course he says they don't like to make the tents look too posh. He said inside they're magnificent. They've got underfloor heating, air conditioning for the summer, steaming hot showers. They're really magnificent 5-star luxury. He said, but we don't like them to make them look too posh, because people like to take the photograph of them and people think they're really roughing it in Russia.
I tell you what, roughing it in Russia, my goodness me, there's a story. I can show you, and I've got pictures of tents that actually look as bad on the inside as they do on the out, frankly. And if you fish for trout, you are a second-class citizen in Russia. You really are. And they will go and collect. If there's bad weather, they will collect people from the salmon camps. I can vouch for the fact they will not come and collect you if there's poor weather in a helicopter from a trout camp.
Fair enough.
And I've been stranded on Murmansk tarmac with no visible way of getting home. It was the most frightening experience of my entire life.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, that
It's
was
probably because us brown trout fishermen aren't very good tippers.
probably is.
So there's a few last minute comments. I'm afraid, Charles, the statistics have got worse for you. It's got more to 65-35, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, they're just latecomers, and they were just making a point. They just don't like me.
Neil says a £1/2 brown in Fianna Loch is about the same fight as a £3 rainbow at Pittsford. As a Scottish angler, I enjoy wild brown trout fishing in remote Highland lochs. Thanks, Graham, for that. I think we'd all agree with that. I like this one. David
And yet, I will counter that. There's probably more small put and take waters that are absolutely doing off the scale business in Scotland than anywhere else in the country, all fishing for rainbows. There's an awful lot of people make pilgrimages down to Rutland and Grapham and others from Scotland. So, you know, they've got some fantastic fishing. What do? Pile down the A9 or the A1 and go fishing in the reservoirs. It's weird.
We certainly are. I think you and I have commented on this before, Charles. We are a bit of a weird nation. We desire to catch wild fish, and we travel all over the world for it. And some of it is just on our doorsteps. It's interesting.
I know. Yeah.
I like this comment from David. Why not ask the professionals, i.e. the otters?
They don't care.
I can tell you on my lake, I'm yet to see a half-eaten brown trout, but I see lots of half-eaten rainbows. I think they catch.
And they get very selective about what they eat in a carp, don't they? They just take the liver or something, don't they, in carp?
It's because it's
really
too. It's because a carp's too big to eat at one sitting, and so they work that out. And so what they burrow inside the body of the carp just to eat the most high-value nutritious organs, which is the heart and the lungs and the liver and all those bits and pieces, and they don't bother with the flesh. There we go. Now you know why they don't eat the whole thing.
Right. So that we've managed to alienate all the carp fishers here. Good.
Well, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just giving you an insight into the thinking of an otter.
Carp very often.
Yeah, very good. Well, unless anyone else would like to jump in, it's been a pleasure. Graham McIntosh says, yes, Charles, there are lots of rainbow fisheries in my local area, which we frequent. I fish them during the brown trout close season. Well, that's the perfect.
Yeah, well, what a lovely compromise that is. That's fantastic. It's the way it should be, I think, probably anyway.
Very good. All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you. And Alan, you've got to say thank you. Thanks for coming in, dropping in, and joining us, Alan. This will go up on. I'll post it. I'll post the recording as a podcast and as a YouTube. And so please forward it to your friends if you would. I'll expand the Facebook post to include a poll about the brown trout versus rainbow trout.
So it's now going to become public humiliation, is it?
It tells you still could win. Remember Italy. That's all I say.
I've got about as much chance of winning anyway. Yeah. All right.
Well, I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to let Charles wrap it up, and we'll see you next time.
No, well, it's normally you that wraps it up, but I would just like to thank everybody for joining us from all over the world. I mean, we've never had anyone from Chile. We've got our wonderful friends from Southern California and beyond, and it's what it should be. We're just a group of fishers that just quite like fishing, really.
And if we can't fish, we talk about it.
We can, indeed. I've got a lot of fishing coming up, which is good.
All right. Well, have a lovely bank holiday, everyone. Thank you for joining.
And for those of you that are not having a bank holiday, you don't know what you're missing.
Bye, everyone. Good night. Bye-bye. Sleep tight.
Bye.
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 Right. Stop the recording. There we go.